we have one more exam, and most likely I'll give that next Friday. So next Friday we may not have class, but not sure. So it could be next Friday or the following Monday. But pretty much next week's our last week. So to wrap things up, chapter 15 deals with therapy. So we'll look at some of the tactics we use in therapy to try to help people. But today we'll finish up talking about anxiety disorders, LCD, and depression. All right, anxiety. Who here suffers from anxiety? Anxiety about what? So most of the things that happen in your life, the different movements, you going to school, work, family, people you interact with, you have an intense sense of concern, worry, or fear about these things. Why do you think, is it uncontrollable in most times?
It feels like it, yeah.
Why do you think, or why or where do you think this comes from for you?
Honestly, I think it comes from the way I was raised. I think a lot of how I was brought up, kind of shaped my anxiety, as I was given like expectations, and at this point, they're kind of gone, but because when I was younger, it was like what was expected, it's like anxiety based off of those expectations, and it's not expected now.
Okay, so think about that concept. You're given a standard, right? You're given a standard you have to meet, an invisible standard, right? They're saying, hey, since you are part of our tribe, we don't expect this from other people, but we expect this from you, right? Because you represent something that deals with our tribe. We don't want you to represent us in a bad way. So what you do out in the world will inevitably affect us, and this puts immense pressure on you to try to reach that standard and then eventually hopefully exceed that standard. How about you? What kind of anxieties do you have?
More generalized things.
What do you find mostly you're concerned about or anxious about? Like, is it work, family? Is it success? Is it reaching some sort of?
Mostly just, probably more. Even if there's like nothing new, just like moral decisions I have decided. So this kind of connected towards the human, I just want everything to be nicely fit in place, everything has to be right all the time.
Okay, and so do you feel that maybe your anxiety has to deal with personal control over your environment and the world around you?
And things, possibly.
So possibly, right? So we could think, hey, no, we want the world to be a certain way. And the world just means our world, right? In our head, we have our own universe, how things should be, right? But if we step back, we zoom out for a second, we say, hey, let's actually look at our planet, let's look at the country, the state, the city, our neighborhood, our school, the people in the classroom. And we begin to realize control is something we have very little of, right? So how could a person possibly help? I would say for me, I suffer from anxiety too. I used to have panic attacks in my 20s, right? I was always, mine had to deal with the past. Like I always wish I could change the past. I may have felt immense guilt about things in the past, right? A lot of grief about maybe people I lost in the past and could never get them back, right? These things are all somewhat reasonable. But what makes them become a disorder is that when they become excessive and repetitive to the point to where they debilitate our daily lives, right? Like this is persistent every day. Generally, when we think of anxiety disorders, we would say, hey, we could look at a range of 6 months, and if you've had this anxiety for more than 50% of that time, right? Say you've had it for 91 days out of 180 days. Then we could maybe possibly look at all the other criteria and say, yeah, you suffer from a disorder. This happens to debilitate your daily life more than 50% of the time, right? So think about just one aspect, a lack of control, right? We're anxious because things are coming apart. We're anxious about money. Hey, I don't have enough money, how am I gonna get money next month to pay bills? Hey, I hope my significant other isn't doing something bad or gonna harm me, potentially break up with me, cause me some sort of grief. I hope my family doesn't find out that I've been lying to them all this time about X, Y, Z. I hope I could finish school, I have no idea, these professors are tough and hard at school. Hope I could get money to pay for school next semester, right? A lot of that stuff is pretty reasonable, but they can become irrational when they become compulsive, right? When they become obsessive, and they become extremely persistent to where they begin to harm us physically, cause up the symptoms, immune suppression, X, Y, Z, or exacerbate some pre-existing condition that we have, or where it causes us to be debilitated. We say it begins to impair us to where we don't show up to school anymore, right? We don't wanna get out of bed. We don't even wanna barely walk to the bathroom and use it, right? It becomes physically debilitating at some point. Now, one of the ways I think that helped me is I began to become sort of obsessive with philosophy. And why do you think that may have helped me? Why do you think philosophy may have helped Professor Ross when he was dealing with his anxieties and panic attacks? Yes?
Maybe because you had a deeper understanding of everything, so you realize that the things you were anxious about aren't really as important as some other things.
Yeah, we think philosophy deals with some sort of logic, right? A heavy form of logic and a rationality. But we say that anxiety can, general anxiety disorder could be part of irrational, right? We tend to become irrational, the world is over, our world is over, things are perpetually bad, guess what, something else bad is gonna happen to us later today, and all this stuff. Well, you have to change the way you think, because most of that is cognitive. So we say our thinking is off. Our thinking is disordered, right? The way that we think about things, our impressions of things is abnormal, right? It is not normal. Yes, there's a healthy degree of it we should do, but there's a point where, or threshold, where we go beyond that and becomes abnormal. So generalized anxiety disorder, right? Continually tense, apprehensive, in a state of autonomic nervous system arousal, right? So you are arousing some stimulation in your body for way, way too long. And it's too persistent, it's too continuous. And eventually, you know, once again, that homeostatic balance we want to be in, right? That perfect state. We're gonna push the limits of that. And that means other parts of our mind and our body will suffer from it. All right, panic disorder, right? Who here suffered from, both of you suffered from panic attacks? Mary? All right, so panic attacks. Anyone else here? Panic attacks? No? Do you mind sharing maybe some of the symptoms you've had, like one felt like it was coming on, or?
First of all, it sucks.
Yeah.
It's like, I get, like, lightheaded, dizzy, like, that's part of the grief. Kind of like impending doom, like I think
Yeah.
of it, and I get shaky, dizzy, like very vivid, like it's really difficult to breathe in that moment.
So your body kind of goes into some form of chaos at that point, right? So you think physiologically, you may feel a sense of your body is failing you, right? There's a sense of you're dying, an impending doom of some sort. I used to suffer from panic attacks as well too. And my major thing was palpitations, right? So I would have lots of heart palpitations. The first thing I'm thinking is I'm having a heart attack, right? Which is pretty serious, right? Because you're like, well, if you are, and you have one, possibly to die, right? If it's real, yes.
I have the issues with that too, and I have to look at heart monitor every month, and
Yeah, same for me.
they just came up just normal, just with the anxiety.
Yeah. Same for me. They put it on me maybe for a couple months, right? And think about this, I was a little bit older than you at the time, so I was like early 20s, right? early 20s when I was having it. A lot of pressure and expectations of things, my expectations of myself. So maybe at that point, if I felt like I wasn't anywhere near where I thought I should be, there was this persistent need, like, I have to hurry up and catch up. I have to start doing this. Why am I not where I thought I would be, right? So yes, think panic attacks is intense, it's unpredictable, it'll last minutes long, sometimes even hours, right? Some sort of impending doom or dread. You may experience terror, accompanying chest pain, choking, frightening sensations, followed by worry over the possible next attack, right? So you're thinking of what's coming next. You have no idea what's coming, right? So there's this impending doom. The doom is coming. It's coming when I do not know, but I know it's coming, and so I'm tensing my body up in preparation for the next bad thing. And anxiety is very common, mostly, well, all of us who experience anxiety. Anxiety disorder is increasing, right? It's becoming one of the leading things in the mental health realm. And as we talk about depression, that one is getting up there to be like in the top 2 of sort of debilitating what we call diseases, right? We think of major depression is a disease of the mind. That's debilitating and can cause death, like any other physiological disease. All right, and we got phobias, right? Anxiety disorder marked by persistent irrational fear and avoidance of a specific object, activity, or situation. Anyone here has any sort of phobias or any irrational fear about anything? Yes.
There's a lot. The main one I guess is heights.
Okay, so you're afraid of heights. What do you think, so when you do some of your social groups or family ever try to push you to go beyond the limit of what you want to do? What kind of feelings do you have when that happens?
I kind of a tiny cat.
Okay.
Yeah, one time, my siblings let me down, like a ride at Six Flags, high. Like couldn't even open my eyes, I felt like I was gonna fly.
Yeah, you're just probably waiting for it to be over, right? Just like, this is not fun, I'm just, how many more seconds we got on this ride? How about you?
Heights and bees.
Heights and bees. I know about bees too, I'm highly allergic to them, so I'm always concerned I'll go into like some sort of shock or something like that. Heights, what do you, do some of your social groups ever try to push you?
Not really.
Not really, they're kinda like, alright, let it go. Heights, I don't have one, but I know a lot of people that suffer from riding on planes, right? Which is sort of enclosed spaces, agoraphobia, we call it, right? It's almost like think about the plane, you can't get out, right? So essentially, once it's up in the air, you're at the whim of the pilot whenever he decides to bring the plane back down, right? So that,
Planes are actually fine for me, it's just like I can't climb trees.
okay, so think about that. You could say, well, maybe you have some sort of fear with your own controlling mechanisms personally, but you're like, hey, the pilot's trained, he's a professional, he's a specialist, he knows what he's doing. But I'm glad I'm not flying it, because I probably will die, right? So we could look at things in different ways. It could be dealing with control of ourselves or others controlling our lives. There's different ways we could look at these sort of phobias. But anybody else? Spiders, anything? Yes.
Spiders.
All right, so arachnophobia. What is it about spiders? Is it the movement? Is it the number of legs? Is it the way they look? What is it? Do you think it is?
Probably like the way they look.
Right, so you say, well, if there were some sort of crazy looking alien spiders and other insects like spiders, right, will look like that. And we say the movement is unpredictable. We walk with 2 legs, and we're limited in how we can move, right? But we're looking at spiders and other insects. I think typically it's not just spiders, it's usually like other insects as well too. the movement's so unpredictable, we don't know if they could just jump at us and get us, right?
I'm kind of fine with other insects, it's
Just spiders, okay. Who else? Yes,
I wouldn't say I'm scared of the dark, but like I'm scared of what lurks in the dark, you know?
okay, so the uncertainty of something you can't see, right? So, but think about that. Well, we would say those are healthy fears, they're normal, but we would say they're disordered if they become debilitating. If you're screaming when you see the spiders, like you can't scream and you need a few minutes just to get over what you just saw, or if you saw one crawl on your arm, right? Or you may pass out. Someone may play a trick and you put a fake spider in you and you pass out. We would say that's sort of an unhealthy and abnormal sense of phobia or fear towards that thing. Who else? Someone had their hand up? Phobias? No more irrational fears? So think of the irrational part of it. Right, the irrational part is if we are, let's say for heights, right? Let's say the roller coaster, for example. Right? Particularly in our minds, we're not thinking really about the other people. All we're really concerned with ourselves, like we are going to die, right? And no matter what the other people have done, who engineered these things, who built these things, all the people that's already rode the rides and come up here, thousands and tens of thousands of people, this one time when we do the activity, it's the time when somebody potentially dies, right? Same could go with thinking about airplanes. Like, guess what? It doesn't matter. I don't care how many flights this particular aircraft has taken, how many people have been on here, what the statistics show. This one time when I fly the plane, guess what? It's gonna crash in the middle of the field or the ocean. It's gonna happen to me, right? And that's the sense of irrational. We can't separate some sort of logic about the other things that even other people may tell us to try to calm us down. It's unacceptable, right? Which means we no longer have control of our minds. We're not even open to the possibility of something else. All right, here they're giving some, on the y-axis, people surveyed, and some fears and phobia, right? So blue is fear, green is phobia. We're looking at percentage here, so we say more than 5%, I believe this is for the United States, more than 5% have a fear of being alone, right? Fear of being alone. Anybody here has just a fear of being alone? What is, where do you think, well, what are some of your thoughts, rather? Alone in what way? Like alone in a house?
Alone, like everything. Like I will be alone, but I hate it to like actually. If someone tries to come and hit me, that's scary. And then also I just don't like being like I like to be around other people like, in that sense too. Just like if I'm alone, I just get sad.
Yeah. So think about that, possibilities could be, hey, have to deal with ourselves is a lot, right? And therefore we may need to socialize so we don't have to really be in our minds all the time, right? But sometimes our minds can creep out and seep out a lot of things we don't even wanna deal with. But then we have about 2.5% of people in the country have an actual phobia, like it's debilitating, right? They're alone, guess what? They're gonna call 30 people, auntie, grandma, mom, best friend, somebody has to pick up so even the conversation can happen so they don't be alone, right? They absolutely can't be alone. They need to be interacting with somebody or need to be in the physical presence of others. Flying's a big one, so we see about maybe 7% of people in the country have a fear of flying and a phobia of about maybe around roughly 3%. Here we say heights is a big one. So heights is very common, right? We say almost 20% of the people in this country have a fear of heights, and about 5% have an actual phobia of heights. All right, OCD. Do we know people who are OCD? What do you can tell us about the observations about?
kind of uncontrollable your thoughts. Like if you understand that they're, and kind of ridiculous, but you can't make yourself stop having these obsessions. And then you have to act on them, which is where the compulsions come in.
Yeah. So we say the two common things about OCD, repetitive, and the compulsions are the actions, right? So repetitive could be even thoughts, and then the compulsions would be, well, let me manifest the thoughts in some way, right? Let me do something. You could be saying a word over and over and over again. You could be moving things around in a certain way. But it has to deal with fixations of some sort of mental fixation. So obsessive thoughts are unwanted and unseemly, unending, compulsive behaviors or responses to those thoughts. They're more common around your age. Why is OCD more common with your age group than, say, much, much older people? Why do you think it is? Yes.
I think you need a sense of control in your lives, and obsessing over something and thinking that these compulsions give you control makes you feel like you have control over something.
Yeah. I think at your age, you're highly creative at this point, right? And so there may be an idea that the things in your thoughts can become reality. And you can change things on the outside world just by thinking about it, right? Older people may be a little bit more, I say, practical, right? They know that many times, because they've had the experience, that thoughts can't be transferred into things they want to manifest all the time. There's a lot of other external forces out there and complexity to do that. Other part could just be, hey, you're under a lot of stimulus, so you have a lot of sensation, so you need to calm yourself. So observe in the rest of your classrooms, right? Look at the other students in your classrooms today. Just do some basic human observation and say, hey, what are people doing for 50 minutes to calm themselves? Literally, they're not doing anything, right? Anything of value, really. But they're doing a lot of stuff, right? Your age group, right? So they'll say, we're doing a lot of stuff because we're highly stimulated. And guess what? In order to calm myself, click my pen, tap my finger, Instagram, okay, not bored anymore, okay. With constant, right? This constant calming motions, right? Things we do to relax ourselves, because remember I said before, boredom is anxiety. So if the topic is boredom, you're gonna suffer anxiety. You need to do something to calm yourself, to relax yourself from boredom, right? Or you think sometimes, you know, it's just become mechanics at this point, like it's built in, right? If you go be compulsive about looking at social media, I mean, you've been doing it for years. All of us has. It's probably not gonna stop. First thing in the morning, you may have to go look at TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, ESPN Sports, and you have to consistently do that because now it's become a habit, right? And so we say, hey, well, if we want to undo the habits to do other things, it can be extremely difficult, right? Extremely, extremely difficult. So we all may suffer from some, let's say, the mildest case of OCD in some way, just because of the technology and social media that we've all been interacting with these devices. All right, some other OCD related disorders. Hoarding, right? I think I'm possibly a hoarder, right? I have like 4 or 5 storage units filled with art, collections. I'm like, dude, you don't even, how often do you see this stuff? You don't even interact with it. So for me, I can say I hoard, right? You can say maybe it was, comes from being a poor kid. So once I got money, I started buying all the stuff I want, and it's just to collect it and hold it, right? Or maybe something else. Maybe there are some other things that may have happened. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, haunting memories, nightmares, hypervigilance, avoidance of trauma-related stimuli, social withdrawal, jump anxiety, numbness of feeling, and insomnia. Where do we most commonly see group of people who suffer from PTSD? Yeah, military, right? The military. When I was in Africa, I had to do therapy for former child soldiers, former child military. And they were involved in a lot of atrocities, right? Some potentially genocide. Some who were involved in the Rwandan genocide, right? Where one group tried to wipe out the other group. And so some of the stories you would tell, they would come tell me, right? They would say that, hey, we went into this village under the orders of some authority, right? They're children. They're gonna follow authority if given some sort of benefits. Hey, you want X amount of dollars, we'll give you this. You want this toy, you want this gaming system, we'll give it. You just have to do this, right? Under the orders of some authority, they went into villages and they were hacking off people's arms and legs, grandmothers, babies, right? Other men. They did that for hundreds, possibly thousands of people, right? So I had to sit there and listen to these stories of what these people had done in the past, right? And so we say, hey, what you do in the past, remember we say there's memory in our body, there's muscle memory, there's every kind of memory, long-term still. Eventually the stuff creeps back out, it seeps back out. And it will manifest in the mind, and now you have to deal with it, right? So you can imagine the sort of, once they become conscious and highly aware of what actually took place, things they participated in, the amount of grief, the amount of guilt, the amount of depression, right? Because guess what? Once it's done, it can't be undone, right? You murdered all of these people. It's not like it just disappears and goes away. It stays with you forever, right? So it's something that can be extremely, put you at extreme risk for suicide, severe depression, all of the above, right? Think of our military, the United States military. When you go to war, what's some of the things they may ask you to do in war? So they say it's okay to kill. It's actually legal, right? They say we want you to participate in the legal killing. Like legal? What do you mean legal killing? I mean you just can't do it on our territory. You can't do it in Chicago and Illinois, or they're gonna lock you up forever. So why is it okay to do it somewhere else and not be able to do it here, right? Once those types of thoughts, that highly conscious and awareness of, oh, this actually is BS. It's okay to kill people just from different geographical location with a different political ideology, different religion, economic system, but you can't do it here, right? When those sorts of rational thoughts come about, then people suffer mentally, right? Because before you're part of a group, it's just like being on the sports team. You sort of pair bonding, right? So you with your teammates, you pair bond, just like you would in a relationship. You're like, I'll do anything for you. You like anything? Yeah, but what are we doing it for ultimately? Like, who cares? Right? That's when you're unconscious about what you're doing. But you're doing it because everyone else is doing it. Which shows we all have the potential to imitate and mimic, to do horrible things without actually being aware of why we're doing it in the first place. All right, understanding anxiety disorders, OCD and PTSD. Today we posit that conditioning, cognition, and biology are helpful. Classical conditioning, because we can condition ourselves out of anxiety. We can condition ourselves out of OCD and PTSD. Which means now, just like we would with OCD, we have highly repetitive behaviors. We're thinking about the same stuff over and over and over again. It's persistent. we could start doing other things that are consistent and repetitive, right? We could take up a hobby. We could start doing puzzles. We could start doing coloring books, something that is highly repetitive to transfer that energy into something else, right? So we can condition ourselves by creating reinforcement and stimulus generalization. Right? And then cognition, thoughts and memories, interpretations and expectations. Think of past events and past thoughts and memories. Sometimes we become delusional about it. We start to add on things in our memories that never really happened. We begin to talk to people who are actually there, they're like, actually that didn't happen that way. Why do you say that that happened? Right? At some point we become delusional. In which case, many memories and thoughts we need to let go because they're no longer viable or even accurate in how we assess and evaluate those things. All right, interpretations and expectations, right? Expectations. There's a heavy burden on you right now because you're young and you still want to do. The older you get, the burden gets less because you would have done more activity, right? So older people may seem a little bit more calm and relaxed because they don't have the expectations anymore. When we talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they have already moved up maybe to the pyramid, where your age group may still be down at the bottom, right? And so you're still trying to continue to get success, right? Get accomplishments, get these degrees, get the job, make the money, buy the car, start a family, all of this stuff. Right? So there's a high expectation. But if we step back once again and become rational, if we become rational, we say most likely these things will happen anyway, right? Regardless if you went to college or not. If you never showed up at Concordia, you will probably be 98% exactly the same had you not ever showed up, because you're still you, right? And whatever your desires were, you probably will still pursue. College just happens to be one of your desires or expectations, or maybe just condition, right? Maybe you haven't thought about other possibilities, so this is the standard, so you do as the Romans do. You know, my theory is, for myself personally, I can say I can look at back when I was 5 years old, and I'm literally like 95% the same person when I was 5. I practically dressed the same, right? Whether I was poor or not, practically dressed the same, you know, thrift stores or whatever. I kind of talk the same. I kind of still have the same mindset, viewpoint. I'm just a big kid, really, right? Add on all the fluffy stuff, right? PhDs, and business, money and stuff. That's all fine. But I think those were already impressions I probably had as a kid of things I wanted to do. And I think regardless, and I got PhDs and MBAs, etc., I still would have done most of the stuff, right? So that's been my rationalization. Like, hey, I'm pretty much just the same, right? I kind of always wanted to do a little bit of this stuff. So that makes my expectations less. There's less worry for me now that I've become highly rational about things, about all the future things I want to do, right? There's no pressure. And so everything's kind of casual and leisure for me, right? There's an old story, and it deals with Alexander the Great. I think the philosopher's name. I think it's Diogenes, right? And he was in Athens, Greece. Who knows who Alexander the Great is? Who's Alexander?
Talking about like the ancient, like the Roman times.
Yeah, Alexander was a great, Alexander the Great was a king, right? King of Sparta and Greece, right? The Grecian Empire, right? Most powerful man in the world, most popular man on the planet. and he heard about this philosopher, right? This philosopher was in Athens. He's like, Alexander the Great always wanted to surround himself with some of the smartest and wisest people in the world. So he's like, I gotta meet this philosopher. Because he said this philosopher has a particularly interesting philosophy, according to what I've heard. So he goes to Athens, and he goes to like 100,000 of his troops, all these people, and he sees the philosopher like laying on a beach somewhere, right? And he walks up to him and he asks, he said, if I could do one thing for you, what would it be? Right? You would expect the philosopher to ask you some grand thing, or you would expect him to be impressed to see Alexander the Great and all the people that came with him, right? Like a big celebrity or something. And the only thing he said he wished for was Alexander the Great to just move out the way because he was blocking his sunlight, right? That's stoicism. That is a person who has appreciated the very basics in life. They're no longer impressed with people, Alexander the Great or Beyonce or Jay-Z, whoever, right? They've appreciated something that most people can't appreciate, which is the basics of life. They appreciated life itself, sunlight, good weather, things like that, right? Outside of all the externalities, which we say the externalities are the things that bring us stress and anxiety, right? We place too much of value on them. We evaluate these external things and give them way too much value. You're valuing them at 100 when they should be valued at about 10, right? All right, so biology and genes. 17 gene variations are associated with typical anxiety disorder symptoms. Others are specifically associated with OCD, right? So genetics play a big difference. And you know what, our genes can mutate over time. So as you get older, you'll start going to do more blood tests and have any other sort of rare symptoms. They may find some mutated genes, right? And say, hey, these mutations are causing some sort of new symptoms, and part of it could be leading to OCD and other things. And we say genes regulate neurotransmitter brain levels that heighten the brain's alarm system, right? So our genetics play a big part in how we begin to, how we think about things, how we experience things, how we give impression. And then experience. Experience affects gene expression epigenetic markers. Right, so depending on the environment you're in, you can start to alter your genes. Remember, we said we're created to be adaptive. We're created so that wherever we go, we begin to adapt and shape a new worldview, a new experience, and even new biology based on the environment in which we are. All right, so our brain is changed by experiences, traumatic fear. So think of even as being a child, right? Depending on how you were raised, your parents could have altered your brain in a way that could have led you to have some sort of general anxiety disorder, some OCD, maybe major depression, right? Depending on how they gave impressions to things for make you to place value on those things in certain ways. Traumatic fear learning experiences can leave tracks in the brain and create fear tracks. Brain area over-arousal involves impulse control and habitual behaviors, especially in the anterior cingulate cortex, which is that front part of our brain. And natural selection shapes some behaviors that can interfere with daily life when taken to extreme. All right, last we'll talk about depression. All right, depression and major depressive disorder, leading cause of disability worldwide. Right, a few years ago, I think it was like in the top 2 or 3. Now it's the leading cause of disability. What is the longest bout of depression you've known anyone to suffer? You've observed someone be depressed. Has it been months, years, days, weeks? you known anyone to be depressed for years? What kind of symptoms do they express while they're depressed?
It's like, weird being around, I don't know, they're just like, kind of there, but they're not like interacting as much with like other people around them. So,
Are they like lethargic and fatigued all the time? Maybe low energy, fatigued. Mentally, what do they express? Are they like very negative or?
Yeah, I don't know, well, cause my situation's kind of like weird, so like, around other people, yeah, so it'd be like, maybe wrong, around me, they don't, but like, around other, they'd be like, it's negative, and it's like, think of the worst cases possible.
So they're not pleasurable to be around, right? So think about that, right? When you're looking at depression, you're saying someone, even if you gave them $1 million, $1 billion, a Ferrari, took them on a trip to Paris, took them out to get ice cream, anything, that still wouldn't change their state of mind, right? That biologically and mentally, they would still be in a state of mind that has to do with displeasure. So depression deals with pleasure. That a person's not able to see the good things, the pleasurable things out in the world, depending on what they're doing. Now, once we say depression is something that probably happens to all of us, but it may happen to us for a day, a two, a week, and it's probably contingent on something that, external factor. Somebody died, right? Someone may have passed away, and that is normal, that is rational, that you need time to have grief, and you could be depressed, right? Particularly don't wanna do much, you don't really wanna talk to too many people. I said, that's pretty normal, pretty rational. You may have lost your job, that's pretty normal, right, be depressed. You might be broke at this, time period, someone may have broke up with you in a relationship, something of the sort. Those are all normal things. But it becomes an issue when it's persistent and obsessive and very, very continuous, even when good things are happening to us, right? Good things are still happening to us and we're still dissatisfied. We don't care about the good things. We want to stay in the state of mind to where things are displeasurable. Right? We don't see pleasure in the same thing. The number one reason why mental health services are sought for our depression, that may have a seasonal pattern. Like I said, hey, I get depressed, right? I get depressed in Chicago between, I say maybe after Christmas, or after New Year's. So it'll be like from January to maybe now, right? I may face some sort of seasonal depression. Why? I'm a person who likes to be outdoors, very active, ride my motorcycle, sailboating, all types of stuff. I mean, I can't do that stuff, right? So I'm probably restricted, and it bothers me mentally. All right, so the DSM-5, which we talked about, is the Bible for us, is it classifies several major depressive disorders. All right, DSM-5 classifies major depressive disorder as the presence of at least 5. So you gotta have at least 5 symptoms, right? So you're going for therapy, like, hey, I don't know if this is just normal or do I have an actual disorder, and is this clinical, right? So 5 of the following symptoms over a 2-week period of time, right? Depressed mood, most of the time, right? Most is 50%. What time is it? Okay. Most is 51% or more. Dramatically reduced interest or enjoyment in most activity most of the time, right? You don't want to do anything at all, right? Your friends call you up to do stuff, you don't want to do anything. Significant challenges regulating appetite and weight. We say depression, major depression deals with lethargy, right, and fatigue. Everything seems like an obstacle or just overbearing work. You don't even want to tie your shoes, just to reach down could be an issue. Significant challenges regulating sleep. Remember we say depression is a chemical disorder in the brain, right? So something is off chemically in your brain, right? And potentially the rest of your body. Physical agitation or lethargy, right? The agitation part could be someone who's always cranky, right? They're always agitated, right? They're always on edge. Feeling listless or with much less energy, feeling worthless or feeling unwarranted guilt, right? Guilt about things that you may potentially shouldn't even have guilt for, right? Worthless, right? Helpless, right? It's like nothing matters. Why does none of this matter? Problems in thinking, concentrating, and making decisions, and thinking repetitively of death and suicide. That's sort of that hopelessness ties in with that, where you're constantly thinking of death about others, or death even with yourself, and potential suicide to end all of this negative experience you're having. All right, we'll end there. Any questions before we go? All right, one more week. We'll all be done. Get out of here. But everyone have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.